This video is on complex sentence patterns. Read the sentence, "The boy launched the paper airplane." Who is this sentence about? Did you answer the boy? If so, you know the subject of the sentence. Next, what is the action in the sentence? Did you answer launched? If so, you know the verb in the sentence. Finally, does the sentence express a complete idea, a complete thought? If you answered yes, you are correct. The sentence does express a complete thought. So what is a sentence? Well, in order to fully understand sentence patterns, you must first know the three basic components of a sentence. 1. The subject tells the reader who or what the sentence is about. The subject must be a noun or a pronoun, and there can be more than one subject. More than one subject is called a compound subject. 2. The verb in a sentence can be either an action verb or linking verb. An action verb is a verb like swim, run, or work. A linking verb is a verb like is, are, was, or were. Verbs can also be in phrase form like was running or is swimming. And remember, sentences always end with a period. The next concept to discuss are clauses. A clause is a group of words that contains both the subject and a verb. There are two types of clauses. An independent clause is a clause that can stand alone and expresses a complete thought. An independent clause is a complete sentence, like our example sentence from the beginning, "The boy launched the paper airplane." A dependent clause contains a subordinate conjunction, subject, and verb, but it does not express a complete thought and cannot stand alone. Some examples of subordinate conjunctions are while, if, when, because. An example of a dependent clause is "when the boy launched the paper airplane." The subordinate conjunction is when. The subject is boy, the verb is launched. This clause cannot stand alone, hence it is dependent. The focus of this lesson will be on how to connect a dependent clause to an independent clause to make a complete sentence. Recall there are different types of sentences and sentence patterns. The first type of sentence we will review is the simple sentence. A simple sentence is one independent clause. One example of a simple sentence is "The boy launched the paper airplane." The subject is boy, the verb is launched. The statement expresses a complete idea, so it is one independent clause or simple sentence. The second type of sentence is a compound sentence. A compound sentence is two or more independent clauses. One example of a compound sentence is "The boy launched the paper airplane, but it smashed into the wall." Notice this compound sentence is composed of two independent clauses connected by the word but. Thus, compound sentences must be joined together using proper punctuation and joining words. There are three basic patterns for compound sentences. Compound sentences can be joined with a coordinating conjunction, like for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Compound sentences can be joined with a semicolon. Finally, compound sentences can be joined by a transition. All compound sentences must be properly punctuated. This video will focus on complex sentences. Complex sentences contain one independent clause plus one or more dependent clauses, and there are two complex sentence patterns. Let's examine the two example sentences. The first sentence is "When the boy launched the paper airplane, it smashed into the wall." The first part of the sentence begins with the subordinate conjunction when, followed by the subject, boy, and the verb, launched. Thus, the first clause is the dependent clause. After the comma is the next clause. The subject is it, the verb is smashed, and then the phrase "into the wall." Thus, the second clause is the independent clause that can stand alone. The second example sentence is "The paper airplane smashed into the wall when the boy launched it." In this example, the independent clause comes first, and it is followed by the dependent clause. Notice the subordinate conjunction when is in the middle of the sentence. A dependent clause always follows the subordinate conjunction. Hence, there are two complex sentence patterns, DC, comma, IC, and IC, DC. Notice only one of the two patterns uses a comma. The first complex sentence pattern is abbreviated DC, comma, IC, period. One dependent clause is followed by a comma and an independent clause. In this complex sentence pattern, you must put the comma after the dependent clause. Remember, look for the subordinate conjunction to help you identify which clause is the dependent clause. Let's look at some examples of this type of complex sentence. Because I want to get a better job, I will apply to college in the fall. In the first clause, because is the subordinate conjunction. I is the subject, want is the verb. Since there is a subordinate conjunction, subject, and a verb, the first clause is the dependent clause. Then there is a comma. After the comma is a second clause. The subject is I. The verb phrase will apply. This clause expresses a complete idea, so it is the independent clause. When I attend class regularly, I get better grades. In the first clause, when is the subordinate conjunction. I is the subject, attend is the verb. Since there is a subordinate conjunction, subject, and verb, the first clause is the dependent clause. Then there is a comma. After the comma is the second clause. The subject is I, the verb is get, and the clause expresses a complete idea, so it is an independent clause. After I work all summer, I should have enough money to start college. In the first clause, after is the subordinate conjunction. I is the subject, work is the verb. Since there's a subordinate conjunction, subject and verb, this is the dependent clause. Then there is a comma. After the comma is a second clause. The subject is I. The verb phrase is should have. The clause expresses a complete idea, so this is the independent clause. Notice in all three examples, the dependent clause comes first, followed by a comma, followed by the independent clause. Because recall, dependent clauses cannot stand alone. The second complex sentence pattern is IC-DC. One independent clause followed by the dependent clause. In this pattern, there is no comma. The two different clauses flow from one to the next, with the subordinate conjunction in the middle of the sentence and the dependent clause following the conjunction. Let's look at some examples of these complex sentences. I did well on the test because I studied hard. In the first clause, I is the subject, did is the verb. On the test is a phrase that finishes the complete thought. This clause expresses a complete idea, so it is an independent clause. In the next clause, because is the subordinate conjunction. The subject is I, the verb is studied. The second clause is the dependent clause because it begins with the subordinate conjunction, followed by both the subject and the verb. I plan to study nursing this fall. I will begin college when the summer is over. The first clause, I is the subject. the verb is the phrase will begin. The rest of the complete idea is complete studies. So this is the independent clause. In the next clause, when is a subordinate conjunction. Summer is the subject. The linking verb is. So this is the dependent clause. Finally, I plan to study nursing this fall as long as I have enough money for tuition. In the first clause, I is the subject, plan is the verb. The rest of the clause expresses a complete thought, so it is an independent clause. In the next clause, as long as is the subordinate conjunction. The subject is I, the linking verb is have. The second clause is a dependent clause because it begins with the subordinate conjunction followed by the subject and the verb. And remember, dependent clauses cannot stand alone. To ensure you are successful in using a variety of sentence patterns in your writing, follow these tips. First, if you're not sure what type of sentence pattern you are using, label the parts of the sentence. First, identify the subject and verb so you can find the independent clause. Then look for subordinate conjunctions so you can find the dependent clause. And remember, the dependent clause always follows the subordinate conjunction. Finally, make sure you punctuate all your sentences properly. Let's do two examples together. When spring awakens each year, the baseball and softball teams begin practicing for their games. Let's annotate this sentence to figure out the pattern and see if we need to edit it for punctuation. The first word of the sentence is when. When is a subordinate conjunction. Spring is the subject. Awakens is the verb. The words each year clarify when spring awakens. Since the clause begins with a subordinate conjunction, I know it's a dependent clause. When the dependent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, I must add a comma. Now I need to identify where the independent clause begins so I know where to add the comma. The next subject I see is the baseball and softball teams. The verb is begin practicing. The rest of the complete idea is the phrase for their games. This is the independent clause. A comma goes between the dependent and independent clause. So I put my comma where the clause shifts. Now my sentence is punctuated correctly. The baseball coach has won numerous awards because he is dedicated to his team. The subject of the first clause is baseball coach. The verb phrase is has won. What has he won? He's won numerous awards. That phrase finishes the independent clause. I see a subordinate conjunction, the word because. I know the dependent clause always follows the subordinate conjunction. To make sure, I see a subject, he. I see a verb phrase, is dedicated, followed with the phrase to his team. Thus, the second clause is indeed the dependent clause. Since the independent clause comes first, though, no punctuation is needed. This has been a review of complex sentence patterns. Please see your instructor with any questions.